philosophy, planes, and Plato. I actually love flying. I love the speed and the fact that I'm usually there before I've even finished a book. I'm really bad at traveling by bus. I can't sleep in moving seats. After the first hour, my legs feel already dead, and I'm constantly moving my limbs to find a comfortable position. But still, I booked a bus ticket to Prague. Of course, I couldn't sleep. Squeezed into an aisle seat for the entire journey, but hey, in the front row upstairs. I tried everything, used my jacket as a pillow, pulled a beanie over my eyes, put my earplugs in, did long exhales a couple of times. Nothing really worked. In the end, I got maybe 2 hours of real sleep. The rest was a strange tired wakefulness, watching car lights grabbing the dark. I woke up in Dresden, seeing the sunrise, then tried to drift off again while the border crossing happened so gently, just a subtle shift in the rhythm of the wheels. The plane would have spent me with stiff legs and the missed sleep, but it would have robbed me of this quiet arrival. And this, I think, is the secret gift of slow travel. Arriving already quiet to a city drowning in tourists, and slightly humbled. Welcome to this episode. I'm Semra and ask today, is mass tourism a collective search for meaning or an avoidance of stillness? Prague, often called the city of 100 spires, is one of the most visited cities in Europe for many reasons. It manages to balance a fairy tale atmosphere while being modern and still be more affordable than many of its Western European neighbors. Prague is one of those rare cities that wasn't flattened by bombing or redesigned into something new. The old town's narrow streets wind through the city, still like veins instead of being replaced by modern plans. You can literally walk through centuries in a single afternoon and experience medieval lanes, Gothic spires, Baroque curves, and Renaissance details all sitting side by side. The medieval time gave Prague its romantic fairy tale vibe, the Prague Castle. It is the largest ancient castle complex in the world, sitting on top of the city. Down below, old Romanesque buildings like the Rotund of St. Martin in Vyšehrad still stand strong. Then came the Gothic era, Prague's golden age under Charles IV. He turned the city into a center of culture and learning, founding Charles University, starting Charles Bridge, and beginning the monumental St. Vitus Cathedral. The spires of the Church of Our Lady before Tin rose at the same time, cutting into the sky with its famous spires. Their dark, jagged silhouettes have dominated Prague's skyline since the 14th century. The city weathered hard blows, the Hussite Wars in the 15th century, the defenestration of Prague in 1618 that lit the fuse for the 30 Years' War. After the victory at the Battle of White Mountain in 1620, the Habsburgs reshaped Prague with Baroque churches and noble palaces, especially of Malá Art Nouveau entered the city like a fresh breeze after a long silence. Floral patterns spread across elegant buildings with flowing lines. But the 20th century also brought darker chapters of the history. And finally, after the Velvet Revolution in 1989, the turning point for the contemporary architecture. Architects and artists introduced bold buildings like the Dancing House or installations such as Kafka's Head, and creativity stepped back into the light. But there's something that makes Prague so unique. Since everyone is constantly on their phone, very few people actually look up in Prague. But if you do, you will reward it with something very special. There's a sea of red-tiled roofs stretching to the horizon, crowded with chimneys and spires at irregular heights, almost free from the usual antenna forest and satellite dishes. Strict preservation rules kept the historic district skyline free from modern clutter, creating a playground for imagination. It doesn't matter where you begin. The city has its own compass, and the needle always lights toward one fixed point, the astronomical clock, or orloi. Start at the riverside below the castle, where trams rattle across the Manus Bridge. Duck under the arc by the Rudolfinum, and the streets curve eastward until you find yourself facing the orloi once more. Approach from the other side, from the long sweep of Wenceslas Square, or from the south, even if you deliberately try to avoid it. Turn left too early, right too late. The passage suddenly opens, and there it is again, the same old tower. Now, try to leave. Easy, you think. Since you're already in Prague for a couple of hours, you already feel like a local. No Google Maps needed. You spin around, full of confidence, and pick what looks like the exact same street you came from. Oops. The streets have transformed into a medieval escape room. Left turn? No, that's a narrow street you've never seen before. Right turn? Straight ahead? The road tilts at an impossible angle and brings you straight into a gift shop selling glass crystals and wooden puppets. You try it again, you'll pass the same restaurant 4 times. 10 minutes later, you're back in the square again, looking up at the orloi. Crowds were already gathering beneath the astronomical clock, heads tilted upward with their smartphones ready. At first, it looks like a map of heavens. The sun and the moon, the zodiac signs, the shifting lines of day and night. But the clock is more than just a mechanical object. The clock was completed in 1410 by master clockmaker Mikuláš of Kádán and Professor Jan Schindel. Mikuláš of Kádán was a craftsman with great skills. He understood the movement of gears the way poets understand the rhythm of the language. Jan Schindel, on the other hand, was a professor at Charles University, a man who studied the stars and the laws that governed them. He understood the heavens the way others understood the seasons. Just imagine living in the medieval era. Every fear and prayer was tied to the heavens. They believed it guided everything. Kings believed their right to rule was written in the stars. Farmers planned their crops by phases of the moon. The stars were beautiful, but they were far beyond human reach, and you couldn't see at gears. So what you see is that those 2 men were attempting something extraordinary, to bring heaven down to earth, to understand the universe. They were building a machine that could translate the cosmos into a language the city could see. That was such a flex. It was a public declaration that Prague was a city of knowledge and a place where the heavens could be mapped. The clock shows the time we use today, the hour and the minute, and even shows old Bohemian time, where the day begins at sunset, a reminder of how the rhythms of life were once tied directly to the light. But it also displays Babylonian time, where the length of an hour changes with the seasons, stretching in summer and shrinking in winter. So the length of a Babylonian hour changes throughout the year, dividing the period from the sunrise to sunset into 12 equal parts. And it shows the cosmic time, the movement of the sun through the zodiac and the moon phases. This is a celestial order that once governed kings and farmers alike. But it also has a moral lesson. Your time is limited. Every hour the bell begins to ring. Death pulls a cord and rings the bell and flips the hourglass. Above, a small window opens, and the 12 apostles glide past in a slow parade. The 4 figures beside the dial are there to warn you. Vanity admires his reflection in a mirror, too self-absorbed and distracted from life. Greed clutches his money bag as if coins could buy immortality. A figure with a turban strums a mandolin, representing earthly pleasures. The crowd applauds like looking at a puppet show, and suddenly the Middle Ages didn't feel so distant anymore. In the streets of Prague, beneath the relentless clicking of the astronomical clock, 2 writers were born who would describe humans' deepest anxieties and longings: Franz Kafka and Rainer Maria Rilke. Born just 8 years apart, Rilke in 1875, Kafka in 1883, both grew up as members of a German-speaking minority within the Czech world under the fading shadow of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Prague as their birthplace shaped their imagination in lasting ways. Franz Kafka was born into a middle-class family just a few steps from Old Town Square. Surrounded by Czech-speaking peers, he spoke German, while his Jewish heritage further separated him from the predominantly Christian environment. This layered marginalization nurtured a heightened awareness of otherness. As a young man, Kafka began writing private journals, where his harsh inner critic took shape, watching every thought he could not articulate aloud. He went on to study law at Charles University, and beside his studies, took a part-time position as a clerk in the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. Days blurred into endless reports. Those experiences seeped into his writings. At 24, tuberculosis cast its long shadow over his life. Each taken breath sharpened his awareness of mortality and bodily fragility. Yet, even as illness tightened his grip, Kafka forced himself to write. In 1912, he completed the Metamorphosis, in which Gregor Samsa awakens transformed into a monstrous insect. You can spot the reflections of Kafka's own experience of bodily betrayal and social alienation. In the years that followed, Kafka produced a series of work that deepened his exploration of guilt and existential dread. The Judgment, in 1912, dramatizes the negative dynamics of a father-son relationship. In The Penal Colony, from 1914, presents a grotesque machine of punishment. The Trial, published posthumously in 1925, where everything is procedure without any real cruelty, just this endless process, linked to the bureaucratic maze that Franz navigated daily. The Castle, left unfinished at his death, follows a land surveyor's attempt to gain recognition within a system that responds only with further paperwork and contradiction. The novel famously offers no ending. You can really see how Prague subtly tilted Kafka's sense of reality, familiar at first glance, yet governed by laws that never fully reveal themselves, and that mirrored his inward life. Kafka was trapped in Prague like a figure caught inside the ceaseless ticking of the astronomical clock. Rilke, by contrast, saw Prague more lightly, though its influence ran just as deep. His childhood was shadowed by an emotionally intense mother and a father who pressed him toward a military career which he quietly rejected. He studied briefly at Charles University before leaving Prague at 20, beginning a lifetime of restless wandering across Europe since. Rilke grew increasingly dissatisfied with the shape his life seemed to take. The expectations of his family felt like a slow erosion of his capacity for deep reflection. Even then, he experienced something strikingly modern, the sense of being overwhelmed by constant demands and distraction of social interactions. He felt most alive when life was open and quiet. Crowded schedules and fixed routines made him feel compressed rather than fulfilled. Yet, Prague atmosphere left a mark on his early work. Poetry became a space where he could breathe. And once he found that space, he never really left it. Collections such as Larenopfer from 1895 and parts of the Book of Hours capture the city's melancholy of ancient streets and a sense that the world was charged with meaning. Poetry offered a way to respond to that atmosphere, to name what was felt present but invisible. The in-betweenness of Prague's German-speaking milieu nurtured a cosmopolitan melancholy that would later drip into the Duino elegies and sonnets to our voice. Love your solitude, Rilke advised. Not sentimentally, but as a discipline. Loneliness, he wrote, is like the rain. It rises from the sea to meet the evenings, and only then does it fall upon the city. For Rilke, solitude was not punishment, but a necessary condition for staying receptive. It was a way to prevent the self from being overwhelmed by the constant flood of impressions that the world offered. Unlike Kafka's isolation causing him imposed suffering, Rilke's solitude was active and chosen. He believed loneliness could be practiced and then transformed into a deeper, more attentive way of being. For Rilke, the world was never empty of meaning, like the four figures of the Orloi being constantly around us. Rilke's mind occupied the space between the human and the divine. In his quieter moments, he may have remembered what it felt like to walk Prague streets and look up at its rooftops, the golden glow of sunset dipping the city into a soft light, and experiencing the rare, precious moments of silence that made the world feel alive. And sometimes, in that stillness, something almost magical seemed to appear on those golden rooftops. I found him in Pantau, a soft-spoken man with warm eyes and the slightly hunched shoulders of someone who was used to make himself smaller so others could feel bigger. It was in 1969, only a few months after the Prague Spring. What could and could not be spoken aloud still lingered in the air. Otto Szymanek gave life to a character who never said anything at all and somehow said everything. Pantau, the gentleman in the dark suit with his white gloves and his bowler hat. He was Czechoslovakia's quietest act of rebellion, someone who fixed the world by raising one eyebrow in his unshakable calmness. Every impossible rescue carried the same message: imagination. He materialized without warning, often stepping from behind the lamppost, or simply appearing at the frame's edge, as though he had always been there. He resolved the crisis with quiet dignity, offers that signature head-tip farewell, and disappears, leaving behind kindness. In the 1960s, Czech film flourished under conditions of limited budgets. These constraints sparked creativity. Filmmakers turned to animators and worked with stop motion, puppetry, cut-out collage, and handmade textures, bringing life into clay, paper, wood, and everyday found objects to craft imagined worlds, often subtly critiquing authority through the metaphor rather than direct confrontation. People like Jiří Trnka with his masterpiece The Hand, and emerging talents like Jan Švankmajer, defined as distinctly Czech style, playfully rooted in folk traditions and boldly modern. The 1970s brought tighter control and heavier censorship. Animation, in particular, became a refuge, using visual poetry and metaphor to articulate what words could no longer safely convey. Often dismissed by censors as mere children's fare, the resulting works carried an ironic tone, subtle acts of resistance wrapped in dark wit. In the 1980s, when censorship had stabilized, filmmakers were allowed to work again. Have you seen Lucy, Post-Rack Ulice, released in 1980 and known in German as Lucy, der Schrecken der Straße, roughly Lucy, Terror of the Street? Though it belongs to the early 1980s, it carries the same magical, handcrafted spirit that defines Czech and Czechoslovak animation of the preceding decades. Friedrich and Friedrich were not heroes, two small figures shaped from one green, one orange plasticine, with fingerprints still pressed into their sides. They never spoke. Their rebellion was smaller, almost shy. They nudged so slight it could be mistaken for coincidence. A chair tipped when no one was looking. And then there was Lucy. Lucy was the only one who noticed the little changes that others called accidents. She didn't see them as random. She saw them as small, quiet adjustments made by hands that were too small to be seen. Lucy's ability to perceive them shows her sensitivity to the world's small truths. You've probably heard the advice to wake up a little bit earlier, and the city will feel like yours. I skipped breakfast and jumped into my gym clothes and took a morning run to Charles Bridge to get the perfect empty shot. Well, great minds think alike, and I wasn't the only one setting the alarm clock. By 10, the bridge became a river of bodies. By noon, the streets were clogged like cholesterol in arteries. Visitors spilled through the old town like an endless cheerful pilgrimage. While the beauty of Prague is undeniable, the city has become one of Europe's examples of over-tourism. With roughly 8 million visitors a year, that's about 6 tourists for every resident, the city center often feels more like an open-air museum than a living city. For years, cheap beer and low-cost flights helped Prague to be branded as a party capital, and bringing with it a degraded quality of life for the locals. Tourism has concentrated almost entirely within the tiny historic core, producing a hollowing out effect. Bakeries and hardware stores are replaced by turtleneck stands, and apartments have turned into short-term rentals. Despite everything, the Czech people remain remarkably kind. Even in a city now packed with tourists, the old Czech spirit remains. It's a quieter, more stubborn kindness, the kind that shows up in small, almost invisible ways. And beneath it all, the same dry, dark humor that has carried them throughout harder years still live in their voices. It's not always meant to be funny, at least not on the surface. It's more like a shield and a wink at once. A way of saying, yes, the world is absurd, and yes, we know it. We've always known it. This kindness reflects the deeper impulse that draws people here in the first place. A search for something genuine. Ironically, the very experience visitors hope to find is what mass tourism erodes. The unpolished parts of Prague, which formed Kafka's inner life and Pantau's silent miracles, are transformed into a commercialized city which people now use for their need to be entertained. The city is beginning to respond, shifting toward a more sustainable, meaningful approach to tourism, with initiatives like the Enjoy Respect Prague campaign. These efforts encourage visitors to appreciate the city in ways that support both the residents and the essence of the place. It's a small but important change, reminding us that we all have a role to play in preserving the cities we visit. It's not just about avoiding the crowds. It's about taking responsibility for how we engage with the places we go. We can choose to explore the neighborhoods and lesser-known places that locals love, like Vinohrady, Kalin, and Letna, just a short tram ride from the center. These spots allow us to experience Prague differently. We can also look beyond the city, in towns like Kutná Hora, where you can find the famous Church of Bones, or visit Český Krumlov with its beautiful castle. I think that's something travel keeps teaching me. The best parts usually hide in the places nobody's rushing to. These moments when you're just there, standing still. You will never get that moment on camera, but you will chase that feeling in every new city for the rest of your life. There's something oddly comforting in that. Maybe it's the same quiet nudge Friedrich and Friedrich once offered. Sometimes the small, slightly off-script things, like a small interaction with a stranger, that stays with you the longest. Thank you for walking through the streets of Prague with me. Good night.